This seems to be a very appropriate way to begin this summation, because I don't know what your experience has been about, but mine has been about a lot of adaptation and winging it for the last 2 to 3 months. And this seems to be a wonderful example of that having to happen. Jeff's at the last minute, not being able to come, having computer issues, Zoom issues. And here we are, and we're doing it. And I think my observation about the last 3 months is that we've been doing it, and for better or worse, and it's all okay. Maybe not as graceful as we'd like to have been at times. I can speak for myself about that. But we're moving on, and that's what this session is about. We wanted to take this opportunity to look back, but more importantly, to look forward as we prepare slowly but surely towards a careful re-entry into the world around us. And we've been doing that bit by bit, but let's make it a little, let's explore what our intentions are about that. So tonight's session is not so much a review, but an opportunity to strategize using material that has surfaced over the past weeks. So in light of that, we have a series of questions in no particular order. And it's our hope that these questions will stimulate a conversation among ourselves. Consider this to be an opportunity for a kind of town hall in which we act as a community of support for one another. Now, we had talked about, most of the conversations we've had have been about personal impact of the crisis, as we've been calling it. But we're very aware that there have been community impacts as well. And Ted and I had originally planned to ask Jeffrey to talk about what the impact on the larger church, St. Peter's community has been that he's observed, and what kind of steps has the vestry and the church staff taken in order to begin the preparation of moving forward out of the sheltering in place status that we've had. Well, unfortunately, Jeffrey's not here to speak for himself, but I grabbed the phone earlier and just asked for a little bit of input. And what he talked about was how moved he has been by the concern generated in the parish for the community at large and for individuals. Examples have been the phone captains calling to check in on folks, which have given folks a sense of community. The responsiveness of the office to requests, and basically folks reaching out for support. He talked about intentional compassion, which I personally found really interesting, that apparently he experiences that people seem to have made a very conscious choice to be caring and to be thinking about the world beyond themselves and the community that supports us all, whether that's been in terms of filling the food cabinet, calling other persons, and checking in on the staff. Although it certainly wasn't surprising to hear him say this, it was also very heartening to me, because that certainly has been my experience of this community. It reminded me a little bit of a thing I heard on NPR this morning, a postmaster from Guaynabo, Puerto Rico, um, who was given probably 5 minutes on NPR this morning to give his little speech on what are the 4 words that he has found really important. And he, who was not native English speaking, spoke very articulately about resilience, which he defined as adapting to what is here with us now. Balancing our lives with work and home and family and taking care of ourselves and our outside concerns, our commitments to what's really important to us. He talked about the people in his community of Guaynabo, which at least when we lived in Puerto Rico 50 years ago now, was a fairly rural place, being clearly cheered when they would see his white truck with the blue and red stripes on it coming down. They knew that he was committed to providing them with a service and that they were not alone. And the last thing he mentioned was kindness. And I don't think we need to say what that is. I think we've all hopefully been experiencing that and have tried to be intentional about how we perhaps share food with a neighbor or just reach out, call someone you know who might be lonely. In terms of moving forward, I think these qualities, resilience, balance, commitment, and kindness, are all really important because life isn't going to automatically be normal. And we do have to maintain a balance in our outside life and our inside life. And we have to be clear what we're committed to. Are we committed to being safe and keeping our neighbors safe? I.e., is that more important to us than the impulse to get out and just so as we're thinking about what the plans the church has made, there's a really good model. The vestry and rector have been very careful about what steps they're taking and very concerned about the safety of us all, and frankly, very cautious, so that the groups that have met here at the parish hall, and I'm part of a number of them, probably won't be able to continue meeting for quite a while, just because it's hard to guarantee that people will abide by the rules. And if there's a question about that, then we can't risk it. We can't risk the health of the community. I think that the staff has done a really wonderful job of being adaptive to the circumstances that we've been in, whether it's the all the online services, online Bible studies, the very creative things that have been done with the Sunday services, and hopefully they will continue to be as creative moving forward. Those are some of my thoughts off the top of my head. Ted, what can you add to this?
Well, I think what I would add, I think is you've kind of given us a soup starter. I think I'd like to kind of get into the ingredients and allow folks to kind of present their own ideas and thoughts and questions and concerns and so forth, and kind of follow up as you kind of suggested with a town hall approach. And what we've done is put together, several questions, and I'm going to put them up on the screen. And hopefully they won't be done in the typical linear fashion that looks like we start with 1 and then we go to 2 and then we go to 3. Actually, it's going to be kind of like a box of chocolates. It's going to be, there are going to be several boxes on the screen you'll see, and that all of them have different kinds of questions and different ways of diving into the conversation. So feel free when I put it up to kind of look through it. I'm not going to read them. We're all quite capable, I think, of reading them ourselves. And just kind of take a look and see which one appeals to you or which one jumps out to you. And I think Mark's going to be kind of our cat herder here and make sure that everybody gets a chance to speak and without talking over the other. So without further ado, here are a box of chocolatey questions, you might say. So here they are. And so we have several questions, and please feel free to just kind of peruse them, see which ones jump out to you and what kind of sparks your interest and where you'd like to dive in and contribute to this conversation. And I would add that if there's something that is not here that you want to bring up and discuss, by all means, please feel free to do so. You don't need to be limited by what's on the screen.
I think I'd like to start. This is Mary Ann. In that last box of chocolate, it talks about what issues come up for you about reentry and what criteria are you using, and will you be using to engage more safely. I realized that I'm very much a news person, and so I tie into the news to find out what's going on. And it was so much about the virus. That was the only thing on the air. And then suddenly, the most recent problem came up with George Floyd, and that seems to have taken over the news. And it seems as if now we don't even talk about it. Aren't thinking about it in news terms. And I've begun wondering, is it still here? Is it still real? Just because I'm living in a certain way, and why am I living in a certain way? Why do I hesitate yet to go into public, into restaurants, because I'm supposedly, health challenged. But would that be okay to do? So I think those are the issues that come up for me about reentry. Reentry into what? We're not entering into our old life. We're entering into a new one. And nobody on the news cycle is really talking about that. So that's just a little bit of where I'm coming from.
How are other folks approaching that? The
Hi,
issue of reentry.
this is Sherry speaking. You know what? I noticed the exact same thing, but I did notice today, and I was watching MSNBC, but I don't put it on until 5 o'clock. I can't watch news during the day. There's a limit. Is that they are talking about the virus now, because 2 weeks past Memorial Day is that there's a spike in many states. And so criteria that I am using basically is that I need to have a safe vaccine before I even venture to travel near an airport, to get on an airplane. I need to have a vaccine, and there need to be treatments for the disease. So using that as my criteria, it means I'm really kind of giving up seeing a grandson who's a substantial drive away, and other family members. And, so it's a disappointment. It's a disappointment adjusting to the new normal. But it's the only way I can see about being safe. And I'm also, I'm annoyed. I'm annoyed with the whole thing that, I'm relatively healthy, but these are like 2 years that are going to be shot. So I'm annoyed, but it is what it is. It's a mantra.
It is a strange thing that we've become, in a sense, kind of had our agendas shaped by what's in the media. And currently, there are important issues that are in the media. And
Ed, I can hardly hear you. Can you speak up a little?
Sure. I'm sorry. I said it's a fact of our lives that we are pretty much shaped by the media in terms of what is the issue of the day. And unfortunately, we have some significant issues that need to be addressed, and they seem to be kind of crowding out. And it makes it difficult because it's almost like we can't walk and chew gum at the same time. And there's, unfortunately, too, we seem to have an administration that, follows the bouncing ball and jumps around to whatever is going on. And that becomes the focus. And now we're done with this. So now we're moving on to rallies, etc. So it makes it very difficult. And I think this is where kind of taking ownership, and I think that's kind of like the focus of these questions, is taking ownership of our own process and saying what is important to us and what is important for our own well-being as we move forward, and not relying upon the media or the talking heads or whoever to kind of direct us in the way what we should be paying attention to. I mean, we need to, I think, kind of assert for ourselves our own right to say, my health is important to me. The health of my family, my community is important to me. And whether the media is focused on that right now, I will be, and kind of take the appropriate steps.
Natalie has something she wants to say.
Hi there, yes. For me, I live alone with the demon cat. You all know that. And so I miss 3D people terribly. And so now that there have been a few people that I know have quarantined as well as I've adapted my isolation to be able to visit them. We keep our distance, we don't hug, but it fulfills a need to be with people for a while. I deal with things best by knowing as much as I can about them. Hence, I have been reading a great deal about this virus and what's going on with it in terms of the future, really. What are the vaccines? What are treatments being considered? And how effective are they? But I think it's very true. We're not going to be safe, really safe, until there's a vaccine that works or treatments that can get us well. And therefore, we have two choices. We can adapt or not. And if we don't adapt, it's going to impair our lifestyle. I think it certainly would impair mine. I think that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks. Ward Wells.
Yes, hello. This is Bob. I guess I find myself vacillating between feeling sorry for myself that I'm not getting to travel the way we like to travel, not getting to do the things I want to do, and then, then feeling incredibly grateful that we don't have to go to work to continue to live like we're living, that we live in a comfortable house that's got air conditioning and has electronic gizmos that let us to do this, and we're able to be mobile and go out and walk through absolutely beautiful neighborhoods. And yesterday we took the longest drive we've taken. We drove out to Tuckahoe State Park, which is about almost halfway to my daughter's house, which is where we frequently go over the bridge to see her during normal times. And I tell you, I came back feeling like I had a high just from being out, seeing a place I normally travel, and I didn't have to, I didn't have to go into a lot of places. The park was pretty much deserted, exquisitely beautiful, and all the green, the blue of the lake, and then you come back and you see all the people down in Rehoboth without masks and just wondering what's on people's minds. And so I guess I go back and forth, but a point Dolores made as we were sitting here is that we've been spending so much telephone time with our daughter that we probably have talked to her cumulatively in the last few months more than we would have done during a 2-week visit.
Right, yeah, she wants nightly phone calls. She's in an unusual situation, going through a separation, and wants lots of support. So she said she depends on those nightly calls from us, so we're glad to do it. So more contact is good. Now this weekend, our son's family is coming down for the first visit in 3 months. So we are talking amongst ourselves about the contact, do we hug, don't we hug? Do we wear masks, don't wear masks? So that's gonna come for an overnight. So we're working that out, what we are gonna do. I might put on my mask and give him a hug with my mask on. So.
And are all of you talking about that process?
Yes, yeah, our son's really concerned. It's my 73rd birthday on Sunday.
Oh.
They want to be with us, so that's a good thing. So we'll work it out.
They're coming late on Saturday and leaving early on Sunday, but they're going to put in an appearance, and we'll see how it goes. And one of the reasons we're out to Tuckahoe State Park is we're trying to find a place about halfway where our daughter and our grandson could come and socially distance and see each other in a place that's relatively deserted and relatively safe. I think she's sort of the sole support of her family, and with a very responsible job, particularly now in government. I think she doesn't want to take any risks for us or for herself, and for the people she's serving in our government right now.
Natalie, you've got your hand up there.
I do. And I think it's terribly important. It has been very, very important to me to be grateful, to realize that we don't have to go out, a lot of us don't have to go out and work. I have a few friends who do, and I try hard to support them. The need to help people, to check in on people, is easily fulfilled if you're a member of St. Peter's. And I make phone calls and talk to people beyond my phone list, because there are other people I care about, and just check in on them. And I find that very fulfilling. I'm grateful that this is happening when I'm 73 and not 33, because I would be off the wall being this isolated as that. I'm really not, I'm pretty content, and encourage other people to be content, to look at the donut and not the hole. There's some good things about this, not the least of which is I found out some of the stuff I don't need. I have more pennies than I've had in a lot of years, because I can't get anywhere to spend them.
Donna, you've got your hand up. Donna?
Well, mine was more of a process question. Is everybody okay with removing the questions now so we can see each other?
Yeah.
Or do you need the questions up? Oh,
Okay.
okay.
Where are you? You're not in your picture.
Oh, I'm here. Huh.
But you're
That's
not
weird. I'm sitting right here.
Well,
Donna,
Oh,
you've
you know what?
reversed the camera.
there you go.
There you go.
Oh, I figured that out.
That's our Donna.
I'd like to.
Oh, gosh. Well, I was going to say a comment about what the Wardwells were talking about. Today was the first time we saw any of our family. Our daughter and 2 grandsons came. And, it was quite an experience, because they were nervous and we were nervous and we didn't know what to do. Our daughter got out of the car. She was like, "Mom, put your mask on." And in a little bit, she was crying with us and afraid she was what if I'm carrying this? And in a week, you guys get sick. And the kids were nervous too. And they had little masks and they wanted to hug us so bad. So we hugged with the masks on. Eventually, we all took them off and stopped worrying about it. But it just made me realize how this is where we are right now, is living with a lot of uncertainty. And I think we're going to be going forward with that for a long time, And I agree with Ted. I think we have to kind of look inside of ourselves and figure out what we need to do to be safe ourselves and keep the people around us, family, colleagues, friends, safe. I have clients asking to come back face to face, and I keep saying, I'm not ready to do that yet. I want to wait till at least the end of June and see if we have any further surges. I don't know. So I'm really wrestling with just how to continue to plod along and live with this uncertainty and try to make, the best decisions we can and stay empathic to everyone's needs. I also kind of applaud the protests. I mean, not kind of, I applaud the protests. I think it's related to the pandemic, that through this whole experience, we realize just how connected we really are. I mean, I have been doing extra presentations for different organizations, and no matter who the group is, and they've been fairly diverse groups, everybody has felt similarly about how they've gone through this pandemic. And it's pretty amazing, whether you're rich or poor or dark-skinned or light-skinned, no matter your sexual orientation, everybody's been struggling with very similar feelings. And I think it helped mobilize people to take a look at our policies and the decades of racism and, what not happened just to George Floyd, but to so many others. And I think maybe had we not had this pandemic, maybe it wouldn't have mobilized people like it has. And just before I got on this, I read on Huffington Post just how many changes have been occurring as a result of these several weeks. So that's all happening too. And I think that's just amazing. So there's a lot of uncertainty ahead of us with campaigns and the election and what's going to happen there. But I think we all have to figure out how to help each other with the feelings of uncertainty. So thank you.
I'd like to make a comment, actually 2 comments. One, a personal one. Does anybody hear me or?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Just checking. The comment that I'd like to make is, the first one is, prior to all of this happening, I'd sort of come to the conclusion that while I probably was going to die of something, it wouldn't be of the cancer that I had had. And therefore I ought to make a 10-year plan so that I could get from 80 to 90. And that was before this all happened. And now I don't have any plans like that. I mean, the plans have been reduced to essentially now and the next little while. It feels part of the answer to the uncertainty question, in a sense, has been it reduces long-range planning to sort of a much more immediate kind of, this is what I got to do now kind of thing. The second thought that I had was, like Donna, I think I am, and I think we all are, making the decisions for how we begin to open up just a little bit to immediate family and friends and to small communities of people. And like Natalie, I've found a couple of people who I now get together with for coffee with appropriate distances. But I lust after being able to go back to the coffee shop that I really like and having a latte there and all that kind of stuff. But I'll make those individual personal decisions just as Donna suggested. I'll weigh things in the balance and make some kind of decision. My question is, for those of us who collectively make decisions about things like opening a church or opening a school or opening a large venue of any sort for people to gather, it's not enough to sort of be guided by what risks am I willing to take? Because now you're making decisions not for yourself and immediate small circle of friends, you're making decisions for a much larger community. And I think we need to be really sensitive to the fact that people who are involved in the governance of our systems, the city, our churches, our schools, hospitals, and so forth, they may need to make decisions that are much more consciously cautious than we might make individually for ourselves. When our family comes in a couple of weeks, a lot of those cautions will be modified personally, because we will all try to protect one another, and that's fine. That's a small system. But when we talk about returning to church with 100 people, you're now talking about a pretty large system. And it seems to me we need to be more conservative then than we would be in really small settings. The people who have to make those decisions, including the vestry and Jeffrey, in the case of this particular crowd, namely the church, I think really have a hard row to hoe, because there's going to be a lot of press on them to we'll sort of say, well, I'm getting more open. Why don't we just sort of open up everything, right? And I think we need to be very careful not to do that. End of rant.
I agree. I don't think we're going to see the church open for services for quite a while. there's no indication that it's safe. And the diocese has put together a booklet discussing what would have to happen. Before the church could open, we would have to send our plan to open it to the diocese for approval. And Jeff said something that has stuck with me. He said, I'm not going to take people that I love and use them as guinea pigs. So I think, plus, you know, he's the only one that's under 65. So is it fair to ask him to do 5 or 6 services so that the groups can stay small? There are a lot of issues here that are many, many faceted. And I'm not sure that there's one concrete response to any of them. I think we have to remain flexible, yet again and still. Amen.
Mark,
Yes.
speaking of insights that I've learned during this time, I knew I would miss our children and grandchildren and have missed them terribly, no matter how much we kept in contact with them. But it wasn't the same as being with them like it was today. One of the surprises, insight, was how much I missed community, and in particular St. Peter's community, and in particular the Eucharist. And as I mentioned in one of these discussions before, you know, the Lord's Prayer and holding hands, we may never do that again, I don't know. But I was surprised how much I missed that. I was not surprised about loving the interiority of this pandemic, and to be kind of sheltered in this house with a woman that I love, and how well we did together being sheltered like this. I enjoyed that. I also enjoyed, as Natalie mentioned, the gratitude, being grateful, being focused inside upon gratitude about reaching being 75 and being alive and appreciative of all of that. There was one other thing, I've forgotten what that was. Maybe I'll think of it in a moment. That's being 75.
Kathryn?
Marcos?
Yes, Kathryn.
Donna's comments brought me to an insight that part of my response to the uncertainty that we still face is wanting things to be normalized, wanting things to be the way, if not the way it used to be, at least more the way it used to be. And so thinking that perhaps, for instance, I've had a number of clients also ask about opening my office. And I've said, well, it's not time yet. Maybe ask me again in mid-July. Well, I attended a meeting today about social workers reopening their offices and was confronted with the reality of what that meant. And that indeed, I needed to model for people what was safe. And it's not safe for someone of my age to have people I don't know into my home, exposing them. It just isn't safe. And I don't know when it's going to be. And I have a sadness about that. I'm grateful that technology has been useful. But as I've been sitting here with this, I'm just aware about how some of my pressure to reopen my office has been from my wanting things to be more familiar. And that's helpful, because the reality is that what's here is fine. It's not what's been familiar, but it's becoming the new normal. Thanks.
does anybody see this as an issue of control?
Will you say more about that, Natalie?
Well, you know, we have no control. We're a bunch of fairly bright people who have had control over our lives. And I, for one, don't have any control over this virus at all. I have a lot of control how I respond to it. But the virus itself and the potential for it to kill me is very real and very close. And I'm not ready to be dead yet. So I'm willing to do what needs to be done to keep the people around me safe and keep me safe too. But I think, being a bit of a controlling woman, I kind of chuckle now and again and think, well, this is a lesson to learn. It's okay. And I wondered if I was the only one that thought that way.
There's Karen. Yes, Karen.
Natalie, I have a sort of a response to you. I keep reminding myself that the only behavior I can control is my own, because I've had moments where it's like, where we have one family member who just sort of thinks this is all much ado about nothing, and why can't I come see you? And I've been trying to figure out a gentle way to say, I don't think it's a good thing. I love you, but that's why you can't come. And I would really like to have a little more control over some other people's outlooks or behaviors. But yes, it is certainly an exercise in reminding ourselves that we are in the midst of something unknown, and we'll have to just wander through it as best we can. And my daughter said, she said, Mom, I kind of think that at some point when this is over, and she puts that in quotes, that we'll have some really good close friends and family, and many people we just won't see much anymore. They'll probably continue to be, as you've referred so often, Natalie, our 2D friends.
I do think, to your point, Karen, I do think that all of this has kind of forced us, for better or for worse, to have conversations that perhaps we have avoided along the way. And whether those are conversations that lead to deeper intimacy and connection, or they're conversations where we are, perhaps as you're pointing out, setting boundaries, things we may not have had to do before, at least not to the extent that we are. But it is kind of calling forth something different from us, I think, in our interactions with one another. And I think it starts with an awareness, tie it back with what Donna was saying, is kind of, what do I need here? What's good for me here? And kind of like just not coasting along, but just really kind of being intentional about one's well-being.
And intentionality comes from a real clarity about what's important.
I've been thinking a lot about intentionality, in the sense that as Natalie says, things are not particularly in control, but we are capable of making some decisions, and they ought to be headed in particular sorts of directions. I mean, we ought to be intentional about what we do. And I think, frankly, we end up being intentional about taking risks. and we will take risks. All of us will have one or another sort of sense about what our cautions need to be, but we need to be intentional about what the limits of our cautions are about. And which leads me to ask a question about Ted's list included having things like, so what have you learned about your relationship with God or the divine or with a sense of spirit or those kinds of questions? I'm not at all unsatisfied with the life in quasi-quarantine. I mean, I'm not really quarantined, but on the other hand, my world has gotten very different from what it used to be. And I'm not at all upset by that, but I am wondering, what is it that this is pushing me towards in terms of my intentional life? At some point, I will in fact make risks that are intentionally there in spite of the situations that we're in. And it's just an interesting question. And I think, I mean, it is about that spiritual issue about what do I feel like I'm called to do that will in fact involve taking risks again. I don't know what that will look like, but I feel like this experience is meant to be about, among other things, about re-examining my intentions.
Yeah, I think in true Anglican fashion, there is a middle ground here. I don't know what you would say, the overly cautious and the devil may care, but somewhere in between there, there is something that guides that middle road. And I think to your point, Mark, is about intentionality. And as you were saying that, I just became aware of, not like I was going to rend my garments and say he has blasphemed, but I was thinking that the idea of this idea of, well, what risks are you willing to take? What risks do you, probably more to the point, do you need to be taking in order to move forward with your life? And that's a, pardon the redundancy, that's a risky thing to examine.
Don't you think that you look at the risk-benefit ratio?
Nope.
No, you don't?
I mean, I could, but I'm not sure. You know, Zorba said about the risk-benefit analysis. That's what butchers do. They weigh everything.
Ah.
But sometimes you just have to cut. You have to cut the cords and be free. So I have a little bit of a rebellious streak, let us say. Why is that surprising? But at any rate, you got the idea. I mean, it's of course I weigh the, you know, benefits and risk and benefits. But what I mean, it's been fascinating for me to talk to several people who live in other countries, principally Yvonne in Haiti, where it's absolutely clear that when the coronavirus hits Haiti, there's going to be nothing they can do about it except to absorb the blow. They don't have any infrastructure in terms of healthcare that's going to help anybody to speak of. And they're just going to have to absorb the blow, whatever it is, right? That changes the way they think about taking risks. It's not, they don't see it quite the same sense of taking risks. It's just life. You know, life is risky. I mean, it's already risky. This barely improves the risks. I mean, it's a continuation of a risky way of being. So the decisions that are made don't have the same sense about weighing benefits and costs. Now, does that mean, I mean, in fact, Yvonne is isolating himself in his home, but he's of a very small minority of the population that can do that. Everybody just has to take their lumps. So I don't know whether risk-benefit analysis is finally all that operates. Sometimes you just have to look at where you are and say, okay, I'm going to do what I need to do.
Yeah, I think if push came to shove and I needed to do something that was risky, I really needed to do it, I probably would just forge ahead and do it. But
Fortunately, we don't have to deal with that one very often.
right. Did you go out and protest, to the protest?
No.
No.
And I deliberately didn't from the standpoint of not wanting to take that particular set of risks. It also helped that I had a haircut at exactly 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Yeah. So I had an excuse, but I wouldn't have gone anyway. And I regret that.
Thank
But I
you,
live
Kelly.
with regrets, you know.
That kind of ties into a question. That kind of ties into a question about resources, and I think that I think in some respects, some of the resources that we need going forward. What kind of resources would be helpful? I certainly think resources that come from solid and sound medical advice and research. I think that would certainly be helpful to me going forward. But what other kind of resources might be helpful? I mean, in light of this conversation, I don't think I would want to, vacation in Texas right now. But this is, it's certainly something to consider. I mean, Delaware seems to be in a relative to the other states, in a stable place. Now that doesn't mean, throwing caution to the wind, because we also happen to be a resort area, and that invites a lot of folks coming in and bringing who knows what. So I don't know. No question, just a thought. Tom? Hi, Tom.
Tom, unmute yourself. Oh, never mind. There he is.
Can you hear me now?
Right, we can.
I was just going to add there that on risk taking, that given that I've got probably 4 definitions in my life that say don't take the risks, stay home, stay safe, and I honor that and have honored them. But there are times when I, at least inside of my own head, I know that I would have to challenge that and take a risk. If one of my daughters, particularly the one who is single, was having physical problems of her own, she has 4 children, then of course I would take the risk and I would be there, even though it meant going to New York. Would I be excited about making that trip? No, but I would make it out of love. That's something that I have to do, or would have to do. I'm also grateful that I'm pretty much at home in my inside house, inside my own head, in my own life, my inner life, that there hasn't been a lot of knocking on the walls for me to hurry and get out. It's sort of strange events with a couple of medical events that I've had that I had to go out and say, I don't think I really like this, but have appreciated the safety that's been provided in medical services. I think they've done an outstanding job of protecting me. I'm also aware that I wear a mask, not just to protect me, but to protect others. And that will continue, for me at least, for some time. That I'm not comfortable. A friend wrote the other day that he had gone into a restaurant and they were fixing the food and cashiering without masks, and he went in wearing his mask. And how uncomfortable he was. I said, I would have been too. I would have turned and walked out without the food. That's just too much risk that I'm not willing to take. But I have to also say thank you to all of you who have taken the risk to put on this series. It's been quite remarkable and quite supporting, even from my little isolated chamber here with Ray and Gabriel. So thank you. Which one?
Donna. Ephatha.
Okay. I know we're getting close to the end of our time, but I was also thinking that maybe it would behoove all of us to be particularly mindful and attentive to probably about 3 to 6 months from now, 9 months, because, and I don't think you have to be one of us counselor types or clergy types or nurse types, but we could all be on the lookout for people's, I guess I'd say, psycho-spiritual health. Because, you know, when you're going through something, sometimes you just kind of plow through it and do what you have to do. And I'm not saying we're all going to end up with post-traumatic stress or something, but I do think that things will show up later, 3, 6, 9 months from now, that will have something to do with what's been going on now. So I'd say we all need to be on the lookout for our own mental and spiritual health, that of our family members, our friends, our community, and just be listening, you know, in between the lines, because I think there's going to be a lot of residual effects. And it's certainly the people that have been in the trenches, like the healthcare professionals and, you know, first responders and people like that. And then we don't know what's all going to happen with the protests and the riots and those kinds of things too. So with all this mixed together, I think we should just all be on the alert and not, no matter what happens with the virus, just be watching out for each other. Thank you.
In line with that, I think I would add, Donna, the question would follow here is, as we go forward, what sorts of things do you need, do I need as we go forward in order to help us kind of, if you will, keep a balance inside and outside, you know? What do you need going forward in order to stay the course, you might say? I know we talked about having caution as something we need. We also talked about, you know, taking whatever quote unquote risks we may need to have to, you know, to do what we need to do. But what other things, what supports, what helps, what resources would be helpful going forward?
I think doing another panel like this that you've done now in the weeks that you've done it, because it has been a very good session. But maybe 3, 6 months down the road, we try a little one. And it might be just, you know, where are you now? And these are the things we've talked about. How are you fitting in there? And maybe if we get some new people to come as we did at the beginning, or we just take time sessions like this. So that's an idea for me.
A really good one.
I know.
Oops, I'm sorry, Kathryn.
I've become aware how important the rituals of my life are. I think, Ted, it may have been you in your presentation talked about the
And an reap a habit.
pardon me?
Plant an act, reap a habit.
Well, no, I was thinking about the offices of the church and how that provides rhythm to the day,
Yes.
and how the rituals of my life tend to provide a rhythm of the day. And the rituals include walking the dog, you know, eating, planning, the schedule of the day that keep me grounded. It includes connecting with my community, meditation community, which now is online. That keeps me grounded. But paying real attention to the things in my life that I know keep me grounded, and that I could easily kind of, not walking the dogs perhaps, but a number of other things, kind of slip away from. But I need not to.
I want to share something I happened to come upon today. This might be a helpful resource. I'm going to put it up on the screen. See if I can find it. It's called the Melissa Institute. And oops, stop sharing as the window is closed. What happened?
Start again.
Cut off. Okay, let me see. Where is it? What happened to it? Oh, I lost it. Well, anyway, let's try this one. This is something a friend of mine came up with. I mentioned her when I spoke a few weeks ago, Dr. Asha George Geyser. And it's kind of like one of these as we move forward, a kind of, if you want to say, perhaps a developmental kind of chart. Let's see. Who do I want to be during COVID-19? Are you all seeing that? Is that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there are three zones that she kind of lays out here. One's the fear zone. And we all remember that, the toilet paper days and all of that kind of thing. But again, it's not like we move from one to the other, but I think we can go back and forth with them as well, depending on where things are at and where we're at personally. But the fear zone, the learning zone, and the growth zone. And I think those three zones there kind of are a pretty good outline of where we might be in our own personal journeys of living in and through and beyond COVID-19. The fear.
Could you email that to us or give it to Kelly so she could put it in the week thing, please?
That's very helpful.
It's an excellent chart. Ed.
You can take a picture of it if you click on your iPad on two buttons at the same time. You know, the power button and the other one, just click on it fast and you'll make a picture, a screenshot.
I don't have an iPad. Well, let's see what happens.
All right, I can, don't worry, Natalie, I can have it mailed. I can ask Kelly to mail it out to anybody who's been on the link tonight.
Thank you.
Sure.
Oh,
So,
Friends, are we approaching the end of the time here, or how?
Yes.
may I just add one other thing? I just wanted to add one other thing. I didn't get a chance
Why
to
don't you
share.
take the screen down so we can see you?
Okay, very good. Oh, well, I'm not missing much, but let me just take it down here. What did I do with it?
oh.
There it is.
I lost you.
Stop sharing. All right, are we there? Okay. So anyway, this other one I came upon today, it's called the Melissa Institute. And the Melissa Institute was founded after 1995 when Melissa Apton was murdered in St. Louis. And she was from Miami, and she was 2 years away from graduation when she was murdered. And her family started this Institute for Violence Prevention and Treatment. And if you go to their website, one of the things they have there is one of the resources is for COVID-19, and there are a whole bunch of resources that are there that can be very, very helpful in kind of negotiating during this time. So I can't call it up right now, but the Melissa Institute, MELISA Institute.org. I have to feed.
That's why he doesn't. You can't hear him because he doesn't lean up to the computer microphone.
What? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes. Can you hear me? Okay. So the melissainstitute.org, one word. And if you go to that, there is a particular button, if you will, for COVID-19. And you might find a whole list of resources on that, particularly dealing with it, talking to children, talking to, families, talking to one another. There could be a number of helpful tools might be useful. So for what it's worth, I just want to put that out there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kathryn, do you have any closing thoughts?
Just that we're all in process. And I think we're all here to do it together, whatever that means, whatever form that takes. And thank you for being here.
I feel like cheese. We're all in process.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all very much. Jeffrey, if he were here, would be more eloquent about it. But you all are the thing that makes the community not be a thing about leaders and followers, but about people who are sharing with one another the stuff that makes us better than we might otherwise be. And so I think the people who've stuck it out and have been to most of the pieces in this series are now holders of a huge wealth of material, and you're going to be part of our salvation before it's over with. I speak as one who has not been part of everything in this series, knowing perfectly well that I'll need to rely on you. And my sense is that will be true of a lot of people in the parish, that part of what this was about was, in a sense, having a community of people who talked through a lot of stuff so that the next time they spoke to somebody else, they were part of kind of a building block for a more substantial and safe community. So thank you all very much for doing this. I think I'm going to turn off the recording now and we'll shut down the meeting. So good night, everybody.
And thank you all.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you.